It is a public safety issue that has created serious problem for us. Last year, for instance, we had 72 teenagers who was killed while texting or individuals involved in texting. So it is a tragedy, and it's something that we need to do as a state legislature.
It appears Mississippi will soon have a ban on texting and driving. At Issue starts right now. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. And we want you to share your opinions and comments with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News. On Twitter, our handle is @IssueMPB. Also visit our webpage, mpbonline.org. Governor Bryant says he plans to sign a measure approved by the legislature this week to prohibit drivers from texting behind the wheel. The ban covers writing, sending, or reading text messages and emails. It also applies to social media. When the bill passed the Senate this week, only 3 senators voted against it, citing concerns about fairness. Senator Willie Simmons says the state will collect data over the next 3 years to see who is being given citations by law enforcement.
The data that's going to be collected will include where the individual had the accident at, whether or not another citation was issued, whether or not there was an accident involved. So we're going to be able to collect good data. The age of the individual, the race of the individual is going to be included. All that information will be utilized so that for those individuals who are concerned about whether it's going to be profiling, the data is going to be collected will give us information as to where and who was actually being cited and what they was doing and what happened as a result of their texting. So again, a beginning point, and in 2018 when we come back and do the repeal, we can look at those kind of things, make amendments, adjustment to it, as well as determine where those fees are going to be collected should be sent to through distribution.
As for the penalty for texting and driving, a $25 fine. It would increase to $100 in July of next year. Well, the House has beefed up a bill to make public hospitals more transparent. Retirees who lost their pensions during a scandal at Singing River Health System in Jackson County rallied at the Capitol this week. They urged lawmakers to require all public hospitals in Mississippi to have open meetings and expand access to hospital records. The House overwhelmingly approved an amended version of a Senate bill that would have focused only on the Singing River Hospital. The retirees we spoke with say all public hospitals should share information with the public.
We need the transparency and the open meetings. And if they'd have had that at Singing River Hospital, we wouldn't be in the shape that we're in and what we're fighting for today. You know, this should not be happening to us. We should be rocking on our porch and playing with the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. We shouldn't be having to fight every day for our pension.
And what we have here is grandmas and grandpas that their pension is gone. And it's been gone since 2009 to quit contributing their part. And we all worked at that hospital with the belief that when we worked our retirement, which is the American dream, everybody works for retirement. I mean, we all can't wait for that. Well, the dream's gone. But we're not going to give up our fight. Somebody's got to be held responsible. Somebody gave the order not to contribute their part, the Singing River Hospital System's part, into the retirement, to the pension. Somebody gave that order. We can't find out who the order. They won't turn loose any records. The records are sealed. So here we are.
And how important is transparency to you for not just the hospital that you worked at, but for all hospitals in Mississippi?
I think anytime there's public money used in community hospitals, where everybody's missing the point is community. That belongs to the community. It doesn't belong to a board of supervisors or a board of trustees. It belongs to the people. And the people need to know where their money's being gone to, where it's being spent, how it's being spent. And that's my belief on it. I mean, we the people, you know, the taxpayers. And I think transparency ought to be across this whole state. There should be no secret meetings. If you got to go in secret, you're hiding something. If you're not hiding something, you're planning on hiding something, you know, so that's my thought about it.
Opponents of the bill say requiring public hospitals to have open meetings would make them less competitive with private hospitals. The bill now goes to the Senate. A bill to provide vouchers for families with children with special needs is moving forward. The plan would give $6,500 each to 500 families to seek alternative educational programs or other services outside the public school system. There are 63,000 special needs children in Mississippi. Opponents of the plan say it's too expensive and doesn't help enough families. We spoke with House Education Committee Chairman John Moore about the plan.
Most of our school districts in Mississippi do an excellent job in that area, but there are a few that don't or can't, or the particular need of a child. This district might not be able to do it, and it just allows the parent, instead of the door closing in their face when they're begging for help for their child, it allows them to reach outside there. And this is a little help with $6,500 is what the scholarship would be if they need to access it. You know, at the end of the day, I would hope that we enact this thing and we put it together, and there's no one apply for it. That would tell me that our school districts are taking care of business out there, and I think that's exactly what you're going to see in a lot of school districts. But the ones that apply, that means that they're needing some help, and I hope that it ends up being successful. And I think that if we're kept the number low, keep the amount of money low, so we can just see if it does what we need it to do.
Governor Bryant released this statement on the passage of the special education vouchers bill. He said, quote, "This will give parents real options to find the best education path for their children. I look forward to the Senate concurring and sending the bill to my desk," end quote. A new study is raising a red flag on the number of children missing too many days of school each year. The study by Mississippi Kids Count on chronic absenteeism studied the 2013-2014 school year. It found 15% of students on average missed a month's worth of school. The school district with the highest absentee rate was Natchez Adams. The lowest was Madison County. The study also found poor areas had the most students missing class.
It is important to note that an attendance record is a predictor of student success for grade level reading, and it is a warning sign for potential dropouts. Too many children or too many absences can cause children to fall behind, and with the implementation of the third grade Literacy-Based Promotion Act, school administrators and parents need to work together in order to make sure that the importance of school attendance is put forth and it is made a priority.
There's a direct correlation between high chronic absenteeism and poor student achievement. And if we want to make sure children succeed, we need to make sure they're attending school. Missing school matters, and this is something going on nationwide, but we need to focus on Mississippi, and this is a cost-effective way to raise student achievement in our state and inform the parents and the communities how important it is that you can't miss school. As I said, if you miss 2 days of school a month for 9 months, you're chronically absent. So it makes a big difference, and all of our communities need to work with our schools to ensure that children are attending school and don't miss a day of instruction.
Joining us now to talk more about the surveys, Dr. Linda Southward from Mississippi Kids Count. Dr. Southward, thank you for joining us on At Issue. This seems high to me. Was this a surprise to Kids Count that this number was so high? 15% missing a month's worth of school?
Well, historically, Mississippi and other states in the country have really measured school attendance by average daily attendance, which includes both excused and unexcused absentees. But when you look to determine when children are actually present, we're really trying to look at the chronic absenteeism. Yes, so 15% of Mississippi's children, a little more than 74,000, are chronically absent.
And is there a correlation between the number of kids who are absent, or the number of days I guess they miss, and how they perform later in higher grades?
Yes, absolutely. Chronic absenteeism really is defined by children missing 10% of the regular school year. So if it's a 180-day school year, they're missing 18 days or basically a month. And when you look at where children are within their trajectory, we have a high percentage of children in kindergarten who are absent and first grade. So 12% of our children, when you combine kindergarten and first grade, are absent. And when you think about the importance of those early years for third grade reading, it's very important. And we certainly know that third grade reading is a huge predictor for how well children will do in graduation rates, et cetera.
Georgia has taken a look at this as well. What did they find as it pertains to this issue?
Yes, Georgia's been looking at this longer than Mississippi. I would like to say that Mississippi is one of just a handful of states who really delve in deeper into the data. And so, but Georgia, among southern states, has looked at this, and they use 15 days as a cutoff, and they determined that among children who are students who are in the 8th and 9th grade, they gave a cutoff of 15 days. So children who were absent 15 days or more had a graduation rate of around 36%, compared to students who were present less than 15 days. Their graduation rate was 78%. So it almost doubles.
So the more days they're there,
Yes.
the more likely they are to graduate is the bottom line.
Yes, absolutely. And students are exposed to a lot of tests, we know that, but chronic absenteeism is really, in the 8th and 9th grade, a better predictor of high school graduation rate than the testing that's done.
Wow. So what are the reasons for this? Do we know why Mississippi has such a high rate of absenteeism?
Well, there's a number of reasons, and chronic absenteeism really cuts across all socioeconomic levels. When you take a look, I mean, there may be students who are absent because families are taking extra vacation days, but then there are also children who are absent because there's a lack of transportation, they have some health concerns, etc. And I think some of this is really perhaps just a lack of awareness of how important it is. So a day or two here or there doesn't seem like a lot, but when you add it up, and as you said, it could equate to almost a month out of a 9-month school year, it's very significant.
And perhaps it's too easy to miss school, because if you're just marked absent and you don't know the circumstances or the potential consequences, and that's what you're trying to change here, is get the word out that this means something.
Right, it certainly does, because we know, as we said earlier, if children are not at grade level reading by 3rd grade, then their trajectory is a really steep hill to have positive outcomes. So it's really an economic issue as well, because we want to obviously increase graduation rates in Mississippi.
Certainly. So do you know, I guess, do you know how to combat it besides just awareness? Is there something specific that the schools need to do to make sure kids are coming to class?
Yes, I think that
basis?
the school districts across the state can first come up with a common definition of what chronic absenteeism, for example, Georgia was looking at 15 days or less, whatever the state decides as an indicator, and for schools at the district and school level to have an have an attendance goal. We don't want to have students at a certain at a higher percentage than that, and it absolutely to take a look at where the students are before they get to your grade. For example, if you're a 7th grade principal, look at the absentee rates of the 6th graders that spring, and so start really early within the school year, particularly absolutely with these children who are perhaps most at risk for missing.
And the parents are required by law to have their kids in school a certain number of days, so there's a law enforcement component of this as well.
Yes, and I think, I'm not sure exactly from the Mississippi Department of Education how that's enforced.
So
yes.
A number of issues, though, to look at that all contribute to this factor that has come to light in this latest Kids Count report. Dr. Linda Southward, thank you so much. Some
thank you for having
enlightening information out of this Kids Count report about absenteeism in Mississippi public schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
House Republicans passed a bill this week in support of a constitutional convention to force a balanced federal budget. House members had a lengthy debate over the issue and eventually voted 68 to 51 to support the plan. 3/4 of all states must agree to call a constitutional convention. Mississippi would be only the 3rd state to sign on. House Democrats cried foul when they say the debate was cut off. They say they were not given enough time to have further discussion on such an important decision. Democratic Representative Robert Johnson and Republican House President Pro Tem Greg Snowden addressed the issue.
The reason that this was such a heated debate, we're talking about a constitutional convention where they have delegates, and that delegate would be your governor, and suggesting that you can have a constitutional convention and none of the valued amendments that we have in our Constitution would not be at risk. And I just think it's a very callous way to approach legislation when we're a state that fundamentally and by revenue has a 3-to-1 match. 50% of our educational budget, 50% of our transportation budget, 80% of our Medicaid budget. And so, and not to mention what we get in all the other avenues. 3-to-1 match. For every dollar we send in, $3 we get back. And we're suggesting that that very government that supports the revenue, that supports the budget here in this state, that's the very government that we want to essentially do away with, because that's what Article 5 of the Constitution says. When you have a constitutional convention, then you want to do away with a government that's not doing its job. And they suggest that the people here in this legislature, in a state that has the lowest per capita income in the country, a state that leads the nation in all the comorbid health risks, indices that we have in the country, this state, you're suggesting that this state is going to tell the federal government what to do. And I'm not getting ready to put this state or the citizens that we have in this state at risk.
This does not need to be a partisan bill or a political issue at all. In fact, when you look at the red ink that we're hemorrhaging in this country, and specifically the national debt, that's not the fault of Republicans or Democrats or liberals or conservatives. It's the fault and the responsibility of all of us. And it's not a party issue. And we have as much at stake, and I argued and believe that as Mississippi, because we do receive so much from the federal government, more so than other states, relatively speaking, that we have a bigger stake in making sure it's not broken up there. And Congress, for whatever reason, cannot seem to fix the problem. It doesn't matter if it's Speaker Boehner or Speaker Pelosi or if it's President Bush or President Obama. They cannot seem to get the problem solved up there. This would allow for states to bring this process forward. It would require them to live up to a debt limit, and they would have to get a majority of states to agree for them to raise that debt limit. And I think it's a very positive and good thing.
The plan now goes to the governor's desk for approval. There are now 11 candidates who have filed to run for the congressional seat left vacant by the late Alan Nunnally. The list so far of all the candidates: Attorney Henry Ross of Eupora, Dr. Starner Jones of Pontotoc, Columbus businessmen Danny Bedwell and Boyce Adams, District Attorney Trent Kelly of Saltillo, Tupelo Attorney Greg Perkle, that is, Northern District Transportation Commissioner Mike Taggart, Oxford Attorneys Daniel Sparks and Quentin Whitwell, Fulton Attorney Chip Mills, and State Senator Nancy Collins. The qualifying deadline is March 27th. The nonpartisan special election is May 12th, and a runoff, if necessary, would be on June 2nd. There will also be a special election to fill a vacant seat in the state House of Representatives. Democratic Representative Bennett Malone resigned his seat earlier this month. Malone served District 45, which covers parts of Leake, Neshoba, Rankin, and Scott counties. The qualifying deadline for candidates to replace him is April 6th. The special election is May 5th. April 6th is the qualifying deadline there. With us now to talk more about some issues at the Capitol are Paul Boger of MPB and Emily Wagster Pettis of the Associated Press. She covers the Capitol and statewide issues, and we thank you both for being with us here on At Issue.
Glad to be here.
Paul, you told us last week at this time that it was going to be an interesting week coming up. What's the most interesting thing that happened this week?
It was a very interesting week. Lots of debate on a veritable buffet of bills. First thing that really struck me was the actual compact debate that went through the House just a couple days ago. And
it was not compact, the debate itself. It was
it was about a 3-hour debate. And what was so great about it, or what was so interesting, I should say, is that part of the debate wasn't necessarily about the bill. The bill was fairly straightforward.
But explain what the bill would do, because it's kind of confusing.
It was fairly straightforward. It goes and it makes sure that the state signs up onto this convention, this constitutional convention, and that it would vote a certain way once it gets there. So essentially, it would make sure that the state signs up to vote that the state or the country should have a balanced budget.
It would join with other states to vote this way.
And there's only 3 states, including Mississippi, that have signed up for
so
this.
Far, yeah.
It would require another 34, 38 states to even get involved. So this bill
seems like a simple yes or no vote.
Right. But to even get that far, it seems unlikely. However, the debate in the House was interesting because it was a complete breakdown of communication on the part of Democrats and Republicans. It turned into this fight about procedure and both sides pulling out every single weapon they could to really just force each other to acknowledge the other existed almost.
What's interesting on this issue because all procedural fights aside, Mississippi is so heavily dependent on federal money. I mean, among all of the states, Mississippi is the most dependent on federal spending, and it's because it's a poor state. And politicians in this state, despite that, do have a lot of success with saying, campaigning, saying we need to balance the budget, we need to balance the budget. If that ever happened, there would be some real consequences for state legislators to deal with as far as trying to, pay for services here.
Yeah, so a balanced budget in Washington could have a trickle-down effect
It
to
would have a
Mississippi.
huge effect in Mississippi.
Yeah, Mississippi pulls down about $3 for every one it sends to the federal government. So, that would be disastrous for the state.
Let's talk about these vouchers that would give families with special needs children the ability to take their money, their public money, from the public school system and use it elsewhere, perhaps at a private school or some other entity to get services for their child. This is still alive.
It is indeed, and as it stands right now, the proposal is for $6,500. The program would be limited to 500 students a year, and that would eventually grow in a 5-year program up to 2,500 students maximum. And so what legislators are trying to do is set up a pilot program as a way to look and see if this would be effective.
And I guess one of the issues, Paul, is that you would have some fly-by-night operations spring up saying, hey, we can provide these services for your child, bring your money to us, and how do you regulate all of those?
Yeah, that was a main point brought by Democrats. A lot of them are against this bill altogether. A lot of them brought forward amendments that would either do away with these vouchers and replace it with another state program, or essentially try to regulate those fly-by-night consumers or companies. And we'll see how this goes, but one of the big things that Democrats are trying to push is that this doesn't cover every child in the state. And that's what a lot of their amendments would try to done. We'll see how it works.
And if they did cover them all, it would be quite expensive to get to all of those.
Right. I think at one point, Chair John Moore said that if the House wanted him to pull $300 million to cover every special needs child in the state out of MAEP, he'd be glad to do it, but it would be expensive.
And controversial.
And controversial.
In addition to that. We've heard from a lot of cancer patients this week and prior to this week about the disparity between the out-of-pocket costs for cancer medication, chemotherapy that you get via IV versus oral medications, and this has been a topic of some debate.
Yes, something like 30 to 34 other states have already mandated that insurance companies charge consumers the same out-of-pocket expense for the pill form of chemotherapy versus the drip form that they would go to the hospital to receive. Mississippi is considering right now having that mandate as well. It came down to sort of a philosophical debate in the Senate from people saying this is the compassionate thing to do. There's no reason that they could see for insurance companies to charge different rates, versus people who were saying the free market should be allowed to operate, even if it operates in ways that may not seem compassionate.
So should the state be telling insurance companies what they can and can't do?
Right.
Is part of the argument there. All right, let's talk about these long-term trusts, something that some other states, some legislation that some other states have in place, Paul, that Mississippi does not, and some legislators are saying we should get on board?
Yeah, this has been brought up as an economic issue for bankers and some lawyers around the state. States around the country have created these long-term trusts, some lasting indefinitely, some lasting 300-400 years. Mississippi's potential law would allow an individual to create a trust for 360 years into the future. That's the same time period that Star Trek takes place. So, I mean, it's far into the future, but it's, it kind of comes down to why is this needed? It's brought up as an economic issue. It's people who want to set up trusts are maybe taking their business to states like Tennessee. We'll see if it works. I mean, I just don't understand it myself.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of debate. Truthfully, it's probably an issue that would affect a small number of fairly wealthy people.
All right. Tax cuts. We've talked about these various tax cut bills and ideas that have come from various places in the legislature, and they're still alive. We don't know what's going to happen yet, right?
That's right. The serious work on agreeing on a tax cut is coming up in the next 3 weeks. This is an election year. I think people can expect some sort of tax cut to make it through the process. The question is going to be elimination of the personal income tax, which is what the House leadership wants, or going with Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves' plan to reduce the franchise tax and take down a portion of the income tax. At this point, it really, I mean, I wouldn't place a bet on what's going to happen. I think there are a lot of election year dynamics at play, let's say.
Well, we don't know which one might pass, but Paul, do you think we eventually will end up with some sort of a tax cut bill since it is an election year?
You'll see some sort of a tax cut bill. I think it's highly unlikely that you'll see the House's plan really make any headway through the Senate. It's such a drastic cut that you're hearing a lot of senators and you're hearing some representatives even saying they just don't think it's going to make it through. The Senate's plan is more realistic for a lot of folks. It's an easier pill to swallow. So you'll probably see some form of the franchise tax get cut and maybe some small form of the income tax as well.
With the time we have left, about a minute left, the Iran Divestment Act came back up. What's happening with that?
Reared its head again. Essentially, this is the bill that is merely symbolic, saying that no state entity and no company that the state does business with is allowed to do business with Iran.
And the first time they brought this up, they said, "Oh, wait, we've got Toyota here, and they've got some sort of interest in Iran, so watch out for that."
Right. The House version of that bill, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't have that company language in it. So if a company does business with Iran, it's fine, but the state can't do business with.
And what's the status of this bill now?
It's still alive. It's going to go back to the House. It's merely symbolic. It's just interesting that the state of Mississippi is trying to get in there with that foreign policy. So
yes, well, always surprises out of the Mississippi legislature. Emily Wagster-Pettis of the AP and Paul Boger of MPB, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.